You may not know the name Caroll Spinney, but you know his puppets, an oversized 6-year-old bright yellow canary and a cantankerous green garbage dweller. Hi everyone, it's Jeff, and welcome to the first episode of Plain English for the new year, 2020. New year, new decade, right? JR is the producer of Plain English. Some things never change, no matter what the calendar says. Today is episode number 221 of Plain English. And of course, you can find all our episode resources at plainenglish.com/221. Have you figured it out yet? The bright yellow canary and the green garbage dweller are two of the most famous characters on children's television. They are Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street, and Caroll Spinney played them both for decades. He died in December, and on today's episode, we'll talk about his remarkable career. Real quick, before we dive into the main content, are you part of our email program? If not, then you'll want to head to plainenglish.com/mail, M-A-I-L, and sign up. Twice a week, JR sends out additional episode resources to thousands of your fellow listeners. The emails have a summary of the episode, links to English articles about the main topic, and an explanation of another English word or phrase. Make sure to get all those free resources by signing up at plainenglish.com/mail. Caroll Spinney was a puppeteer who played two of the most recognizable characters on children's television, Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch, who lived outside the famous brownstone house at 123 Sesame Street. Big Bird had a disposition as sunny as his 5,961 feathers. Oscar the Grouch was the opposite. Spinney died in December last year. He retired from the iconic television show Sesame Street only in 2018 after almost half a decade on the show. Spinney played his characters in live performances, at the White House, in the movies, and of course on television, where Sesame Street has been a fixture for over half a century. It all began when Spinney was a young man. He met Sesame Street creator Jim Henson at a puppeteers convention in Salt Lake City, Utah in the 1960s. At the time, Spinney had been puppeteering for a decade and was playing a cat on the local television station in Boston. He joined the cast of Sesame Street shortly thereafter. Other characters on Sesame Street include Kermit the Frog, Cookie Monster, and Ernie and Bert. Spinney also played minor characters Bruno the Trash Man, Granny Bird, and Elmo. Though Henson was the creator of Sesame Street, and though the lines of the characters were scripted, the puppeteers all contributed to the development of the familiar characters. Right from the beginning, Spinney helped form his two characters. In Henson's original plan, Big Bird was supposed to be a funny but dumb and unsophisticated country character, And by country, I mean like from a rural area. But it was Spinney who said that the character should reflect the audience. So Big Bird became a perennial 6-year-old. He made his mark on Oscar the Grouch, too. Henson's vision was for Oscar to be modeled after a rude waiter at a restaurant, but Spinney modeled him after a rude New York City cab driver. And so it was for almost 5 decades. Spinney would play both characters, Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch, on the show. When they appeared in a scene together, an understudy would play Big Bird, but it was always Spinney's voice. Big Bird has always been 6 years old. The character channels the audience. He has the full range of emotions that 6-year-olds have and the high-pitched voice to match. Sometimes he was shy, other times he was outgoing. Sometimes he was full of energy, other times more relaxed. Sometimes serious, sometimes goofy. It couldn't have been easy playing Big Bird. The 5'10" tall Spinney would have to maneuver from inside the 8'2" yellow canary. He maneuvered the bird with a series of wires, and the only way he knew where to walk was from a monitor strapped to his chest. Spinney's creative streak dated back to his early childhood when he was interested in painting, drawing, and puppetry. His mother made him a collection of puppets to play with on a homemade stage. When he was 12, he had a collection of 70 puppets. Though he loved the performances, he never sought fame for himself, saying that his character's fame was quite enough for him. And famous they were. Over 4,500 episodes in 50 years, the characters were enjoyed by children around the world. 150 million children, according to one estimate, in over 70 languages. It has been universally accepted as the ideal of what a children's television show should be. Generations of kids, myself included, counted Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch among our first friends. By 2015, the physical strain of puppeteering became too much, and Spinney cut back on his duties. He still provided the voiceover to his characters, but let his longtime understudy take permanent control of Big Bird's body. Then, as Sesame Street was about to turn 50 years old in late 2018, Spinney retired completely. He died at his home in Connecticut at the age of 85 last month. Here's a quote I liked from Caroll Spinney. He said, "I think most people completely forget what it was like being a kid by the time they grow up." Ernie and Bert were my favorites. Most people liked Big Bird the best, but my favorite characters were Ernie and Bert. Ernie especially. I think I had trouble saying Bert, so that's why I liked Ernie better. What an incredible talent. So this is just a great phrasal verb today, and timely too, as we head into the new year. The phrasal verb is cut back on. to cut back on something. Let's think about what that means. Here's how you heard it. After more than 4 decades playing the oversized Big Bird, Caroll Spinney cut back on his Sesame Street duties. After 2015, he just provided the voice and let his understudy move around inside the 8-foot-tall canary. He cut back on his duties. He reduced his duties, but he didn't give them up completely. When you cut back on something, you are reducing the amount of it in your life. Caroll Spinney cut back on his Sesame Street duties. He didn't quit, he didn't stop, but he just reduced his duties. Why do I say that this is timely here at the beginning of the year? Some of you might have New Year's resolutions that involve cutting back on things in your life. I'm going to try to cut back on my business travel in the coming year. Although I do like to be face-to-face with my clients and my teams in other cities, the travel has started to tire me out. So I'm going to try to cut back on the travel. I can't eliminate it entirely. I don't want to, but I would like to do a little bit less. I'm going to cut back on traveling. Some of you might want to cut back on eating junk food. That's a common New Year's resolution. You might want to cut back on junk food or cut back on drinking alcohol, like we talked about in a recent episode. You might want to cut back on salt if you have high blood pressure. You could cut back on watching television late at night if you find that you have trouble sleeping. You might be seeing a pattern here. You can cut back on an activity like watching television, or you can cut back on a thing like salt or sugary drinks. The important thing here is that you use cut back on when you mean a reduction in the amount of something. If you want to imply more than a gradual reduction, then you can say cut way back. My friend went to the doctor and found he had very high blood pressure. His doctor told him to cut way back on salt. That doesn't mean just reducing things like French fries and such. That means everything with salt and preservatives, seasonings, marinades, even pasta sauce can have a lot of salt in it. If you're cutting way back on salt, you need to read the labels on everything and keep track of how much you have. That's because to cut way back on something means to reduce it drastically, reduce it a lot. What could you cut way back on? If you lead a relatively healthy lifestyle, then you can't cut way back on junk food because you're not eating a lot of it in the first place. But if you have a sugary drink every day, then switching to just once a week would be cutting way back. You might decide your kids need to cut way back on their screen time so you can disconnect the Wi-Fi in your house after dinner. Talk about torture. Okay, the song of the week is Bein' Green by someone who would know quite a bit about being green, Kermit the Frog. This was the song that Kermit always sings on Sesame Street. The creator of Sesame Street, Jim Henson, died in 1990, and Carol Spinney sang this song in character as Big Bird at Henson's funeral. The song starts out with Kermit singing that it's not easy being green, blending into the color of trees and leaves. He says it would be so much better to be red or yellow or gold. But by the end of the song, he says that green is beautiful, and that's exactly what he wants to be. It's a song about knowing and accepting yourself. Bein' Green, written by Joe Raposo and performed so often by Jim Henson as Kermit the Frog. That's it for this first episode of Plain English in 2020. Don't forget to join us on Monday for another episode. If you're serious about improving in English in 2020, then I encourage you to check out Plain English Plus. One of the best features of Plain English Plus is our video lessons. With each episode, twice a week, we highlight one little piece of grammar or English usage, and we show you how to use it in a video lesson. And if you think it's just sitting back and watching, it's not. You get to write your own sentences right from inside the video. And these videos show you ways to connect ideas, develop your thoughts, and sound more professional in your writing and speaking. If this sounds like what you need, then come check us out at plainenglish.com/plus.